Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Academia Podcast. My name is Todd Thielen, host of the show, broadcasting from the Warp Zone Studios, deep in the heart of central Minnesota. It's Friday morning, January 22nd, 2021. Jumping right into it this morning, a new administration is in full effect. Yesterday I got to listen to Ted Cruz blast Mayor Pete, and it was an enjoyable sight to see. As he lines up to become the newest transportation secretary, it was kind of amazing just to see how completely dumbfounded he is and how to answer Ted Cruz. I mean, Ted Cruz is one of the guys that, you really don't want to go against him. He's done his homework, he has experience, and he's got boldness. I believe, was really set up to become even something higher than just being a senator. I could see him becoming the next president, to be honest with you. But anyways, he completely targeted him about the idea of one of Biden's first strokes of the pen was getting rid of over 11,000 union jobs, getting rid of the Keystone Pipeline. And Mayor Pete's rebuttal is, well, we're going to create new jobs through our commitment to climate change. And Ted Cruz responded and said, so other people will get the jobs that these people are losing. That's what we tell them. Tough luck. Other people are going to be getting your jobs. And to which Mayor Pete kind of just, they all just restate the same thing. And that's why, if you want to hear what's going on across all of the news media, just turn it on for 5 minutes, which I don't even recommend that. But hearing one station, hearing what they say, they repeat it in echo chambers, and you know exactly that they're all but one mind. But this is the way it's going to be across the board as Americans do lose their jobs, and they continue to head down a destructive path that hasn't worked before. So I guess why try again, right? Well, because Orange Man bad, and that's the way the left sees it. Anyone's a good choice as long as it isn't him. But, as things do move forward, they're going to continue to blame him because I believe that they were emotionally dependent upon Trump in a negative way because they had to blame all of their issues on him. Anyways, I have a little bit more to say about this, and if you want to check out more about kind of the current events and my thoughts about the current situations, you can head over to an article that I wrote at my personal website. It's at toddthielen.com/America. Anyways, I just wanted to take a look here today at the new nomination for the Education Secretary, and I do have some articles here pulled up that I want to, if you're seeing on YouTube, you'll be able to see what I'm looking at here. All right, we got here the 5 big questions facing Miguel Cardona, Biden's pick for Education Secretary. Fox News, they paint a lovely picture of him, of how he's different than the rest of the fold. It seems like Fox News has kind of just spearheaded itself in a different direction. And we see that this article that I posted on my Facebook account from Chalkbeat talks about the big 5 questions about, who is he? And, it's a pretty neutral article. It talks about what's his relationship with the unions, what's he going to do about testing this year, what's his ideas regarding Corona, how about school choice? This one's huge. It's a lot of fluff, doesn't really say anything. And what does he do to reverse DeVos's moves? If you guys don't know, Betsy DeVos was the education secretary in the Trump era. But then we take a look at this article here, and it says to buckle up for a critical race curriculum. Basically speaking, if you guys don't know what critical race theory, it's kind of just an undoing. It's a reconstructionist theory. It attempts to redo history in any type of light it wants to. In this case, to talk mainly from the point of race, to target the idea that white people are the oppressive ones and that everything that's been done has been to oppress other people. That's just simply not true. The education is way more multifaceted and complex than just looking at that. But making critical race theory a key component of children's curriculum is a recipe for disaster. Cardona has done this in Connecticut as the commissioner of education, and it's been something that he's been trying to spearhead as well. So it doesn't look good. Would I, in my opinion, keep DeVos? Yeah, absolutely. But I'd rather take more of a Ron Paul approach. When they asked him in 2008, 2012, what would be your idea toward the Department of Education? And he basically said, I would abolish it. I would completely get rid of the Department of Education. But what they do, and what people and media pundits have always done, is that anybody that's against schooling, mass schooling, compulsory schooling, is somehow against education. And that's something that they continue to use, and they continue to suggest would be something that is part of anybody that believes in school choice or limited government is somehow against schooling. So I don't have any confidence with the education secretary moving forward, especially for the kids that you have in public schools, with the new developments of critical race theory being something that is going to be taught widespread in the curriculum across our great land. So with that being said, today I have a book that I'm going over. It's probably one of the best. It's most relevant to our overall conversation. It's called Dumbing Us Down. If you can see that, I have the book here right in front of me, by John Taylor Gatto, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Schooling. If you guys don't know who John Taylor Gatto is, he passed away in 2018, but he was an American author, school teacher who taught in the classroom for nearly 30 years, devoted much of his energy to his teaching career, and following his resignation, authored several books on modern education, criticizing its ideology, history, and consequences. He was named the New York City Teacher of the Year 1989, 1990, 1991, and the New York State Teacher of the Year in 1991. So he does have an extensive teaching background. He, as someone else, is coming from a different type of perspective than what I'm going to be hitting on in other parts of the year with some of the books I've read. A lot of authors that I will be talking about have started with a conservative background or a limited government background or a libertarian background, have seen the flaws of a state that is large as it is, a big centralized government. They've seen the error in their areas of expertise and their areas of influence, and they have extrapolated their experience to be able to talk about the discussion of education. Now, on the flip side of the coin, John Taylor Gatto, as I'll be explaining, started off as a school teacher, and then over the course of time had learned and developed the issues of seeing the problems with mass schooling, compulsory schooling, government, state-run education. And we're talking about some of his findings here today. He starts off his segment of the book called The 7-Lesson School Teacher. Basically speaking, he has been led to believe that through administrations, Department of Educations, and teachers' unions, that the 7 main goals of a school teacher is to sow seeds of confusion, to sow seeds of class position, to make students indifferent, to have them create emotional dependency, an intellectual dependency, provisional self-esteem, and the idea that one cannot hide or constant surveillance over everything we're doing. And I'll be talking about this just a little bit right now, just because I don't have any type of quotes highlighted about the surveillance and one being it can't hide. But the problem with that is that when you have constant surveillance inside the school and you have other students looking over everything you're doing and the teachers walking around over everything you're doing, you're not providing a chance for a student to develop self-education in solitude. And that extends at home. When there's homework given, you are extending the classroom beyond the hours of the school day so that students are completely driven to continue the curriculum, to continue the one-channeled education into their minds, to the point where parents can't even have conversations, with the fear that the state suggests that we don't want parents using too much of their independent time to be able to teach them things other than what we want them to learn. And so it's kind of disgusting. This book has been kind of nauseating. I'm going to be going over some different types of quotes in the book, just because this is one of the books that I felt like needed a full read, and it's really kind of difficult to just give you a spark notes, as this man has bled years over the course of these pages. Anyways, the first idea here to be is that school has replaced the church. He says here that no common school had actually dared to teach the use of critical thinking tools like the dialectic, the heuristic, or other devices that free minds should employ would last very long before being torn to pieces. School has become the replacement for church in our secular society, and like church, it requires that its teachings must be taken on faith. Continuing, John Taylor Gatto suggests that school is very much now like a jail. It says here that the lessons cannot be learned in schools as they are. School is a 12-year jail sentence where bad habits are the only curriculum truly learned. I teach school and win awards doing it, and I should know better. So basically, he gave a speech in 1991 about his Teacher of the Year award, and you could probably hear a pin drop after it was done, because he didn't have anything good to say at all about the current state of affairs of education. And this was in the early 90s. Moving on to page 25, he said that the schools don't provide any room for spontaneous education. Basically speaking, although teachers do care, and they do work very hard, the institution is psychopathic. It has no conscience. It rings a bell, and the young man in the middle of writing a poem must close his notebook and move to a different cell where he must memorize that humans and monkeys derive from a common ancestor. So he just continues to go on to suggest that the goals of education are hostile. The goals of schooling are hostile to education. There's a very big difference between schooling and education. We'll be getting into that in just a little bit here. And going on to page 28, I'm just reading over quotes because I'm painting a backdrop of, I guess, overall discussion here of where we're at here today. The idea that homeschooling has grown, and let's see here. Yes, the idea of homeschooling has grown. Sorry, I missed a page. Thank you for being patient here with me today. And it just says that here's another curiosity to think about. The homeschooling movement has quietly grown to a size where 1.5 million young people are being educated entirely by their own parents. Last month, the Education Press reported the amazing news that children schooled at home seem to be 5 or even 10 years ahead of their formally trained peers in their ability to think. So these are eye-opening findings here. And then also the idea that television is now partnering with schooling, and we can probably extrapolate that today with cell phones. Two institutions at present control our children's lives, television and schooling, in that order. Both of these reduce the real world of wisdom, fortitude, temperance, and justice to a never-ending, non-stop abstraction. In centuries past, the time of childhood and adolescence would have been occupied in real work, real charity, real adventures, and the realistic search for mentors who might teach what you really wanted to learn. A great deal of time was spent in community pursuits, practicing affection, meeting and studying at every level of the community, and learning how to make a home, and dozens of other tasks necessary to becoming a whole man or woman. So we kind of deprive students from community learning by isolating them pretty much for 12 years. Moving on, page 34 suggests the idea, once again, that I kind of already talked about already. Sometimes the problem is the problem of mastering solitude, as Thoreau did at Walden Pond, or Einstein did at the Swiss Customs House. And I thought this was very real for me as well. I don't feel like I developed a true sense of solitude until I moved to California at age 21 for about 5 months. And then once again to moving to Alaska, especially the very first community I lived in, the town of Angoon, for a year, because there was no previous form of solitude. And I'm talking about months of just learning how to spend time in the quiet and learning who you are. Just don't really give that option to students and kids growing up when it is very much needed. Moving on and forward here, we'll talk about the difference between communities and networks. John Taylor Gatto did suggest here that there's a huge difference between communities and networks. And okay, here we go. A surprising number of otherwise sensible people find it hard to see why the scope and reach of our formal schooling network should not be increased by extending the school day or year, for instance, in order to provide an economical situation to the problems posed by the decay of the American family. One reason for their preference, I think, is that they have been trouble understanding the real difference between communities and networks, or even the difference between families and networks. So one other indictment that he gives here is the idea that it's not good to extend the school day or the school year. And so basically we're hearing from the Biden administration the idea of giving more money and more influence to be able to have more emphasis on pre-emergent programs set for 3 and 4-year-olds, and to continue the provision of community colleges for students. And so basically what we're doing is we're extending the number of years in school. And it's basically becoming this extension of a synthetic family, where you're trying to do everything. You're trying to increase the amount of hours of the school day, have them come to school earlier to eat, providing their own form of health care there. You're basically creating a synthetic form of family that's not organic at all. Basically, now moving forward, there's a Platonic versus Aristotelian view of the idea of being taught by an expert, whereas Aristotle saw a long time ago that fully participating in a complex range of human affairs was the only way to become fully human, and that he differed from Plato. What is gained from consulting a specialist and surrendering all judgment is often more outweighed by a permanent loss of one's own volition. The discovery accounts for the curious texture of real communication, where people argue with their doctors, lawyers, and ministers, tell craftsmen what they want instead of accepting what they get, frequently make their own food from scratch instead of buying it in a restaurant or defrosting it, and perform many similar acts of participation. A real community is, of course, a collection of real families who themselves function in this participatory way. All right, so it's getting brutal. He covers so many topics in this book. And I could go on, and I believe I could go on and on. I have about 20 more quotes to read, but I am not going to go there. I feel like I just kind of need to paint a picture here. He goes on and on, talking about the ideas that networks are not communities. The idea that there's a false sense of network when you're being forced into a cell for 12 years out of the year. It's not an organic community. It's a collection of families with a common vision. The main goal here of schooling, obviously, is funding to be able to continue to pay overhead, administration, and teachers, not educating students. He goes on to believe that over his course of time, it only takes 100 years or less to teach an actual child how to read, write, and do arithmetic. So why 12 years? Finding a sense of purpose does not happen inside the school. It happens with the family. It happens with self-discovery, and it happens through solitude. Finding truth is frowned upon in public schools. Conformity is the only thing that truly matters. And the idea of being a whistleblower, even as an educator, is frowned upon because you're likely to put your future job security at stake. Schools often blame families. And you know what? Maybe I'll just go ahead and read that one, because I want to get into it. You'd say I want to be able to have some substance to that claim. Okay. Schools stifle family originality by appropriating the critical time needed for any sound idea of family to develop. Then they blame the family for its failure to be a family. So they blame the family for not doing their own job on educating their own kids, with the idea that they're the ones doing all the work while they're at school, and there's no continuum when they get home. And then they blame the family for not being a family when they're not given the chance to be a family because they've completely subsidized their entire life for children to take their life and to be thrown into a prison or basically an overrated daycare, an overrated zoo. With this idea, this overall question, what are we going to do as a society with all these children? Let's see here. So basically, he goes on to believe that education, the actual goals of education, does not actually cost much. You don't have to buy every trinket and whistle out there. It doesn't take much to actually teach kids. The ideas that he believes is that we must privatize everything and add free market principles. It's the only way out of this. The idea that we can vote with our feet, just as he paints a picture of the start of churches here in when America was founded, and how in a local community there may have been a Congregationalist settlement, and as the emergence of more Church of England and other types of Presbyterian churches grew, people had the choice to vote with their feet of where they actually went to church. And if there was something that didn't have a check with its localized system, the word got out and people could use that some form of church choice to be able to attend church where they want to based upon their principles. Same thing goes with school, and we have to localize it. We have to allow people to vote with their feet, to be able to opt out of the system, and to have those types of dollars move with them. I mean, I'm not a fan of using grants or dollars to begin with just because of being a fiscal conservative. I do fully believe that we need to be responsible with that, especially with the debt that we're facing. Doesn't seem to be a fun topic of conversation, but if there's funds being spent on public dollars, I've already said it before, it should be able to follow with you being to teach your own children at home or sending them to a magnet, charter school, private school, etc., etc. Networks must be voluntary. You can't force them, because who honestly picks and chooses which students go in which classrooms? Networks need to be voluntary for a true community to exist. And the last component here is that teaching must be decertified and that licensing is a scam. So, I mean, it's a long indictment and it's nauseating and it's hard to read because this is the truth. The truth is not convenient. And this is where we're at here. And, this podcast here today is a little bit shorter than most podcasts. I wanted to get this done. I wanted to get this out of the way because sometimes we have to address things that are not comfortable, but it's an overall discomfort that is going to propel change. We have to be able to see what it is. The leviathan of what this school is that it is operating on autopilot at this point. The only way to stop it is if for individual families will continue to see that there is a problem and that they have the ability to change it at their level. But it is going to take effort. It is going to take planning. It's going to take organization. If you are a parent with small children, or you're planning on having kids someday, or you're a parent that already is in the middle of having schooling be a prevalent issue in your life, there is no better time than the present to be able to explore these options. There's no better time, especially with what has been exposed over the last year with 2020. Schooling is continuing to not work. I did a figure explanation a few episodes back about the level of money that the public schools in Chicago spend is absolutely ridiculous. They're in the realm of billions being spent every year, and they're not meeting in person. And so if you have the ability to teach, have the ability to use YouTube, have the ability to just spend time and love your kids, you could give them a better education where they're going to be 5 or 10 years above their counterparts. Because what we're really doing is, like I said, we are promoting inside them indifference, emotional dependency, intellectual dependency, a provisional self-esteem. The idea that you can't hide, that your position matters, that the truth doesn't matter, only compliance does, for them to be constantly confused and constantly indifferent about how they are. And that's just how the things are going to continue with public schooling. So I want to invite you to continue to be part of what we're doing here, is that every episode I'm going to be devoted to teaching a different angle or a different slant or a different practical step of what you can do. I just want to give you, a resource here, and I'm going to be putting it up in just a second on, if you're seeing YouTube, you can see what I'm doing here. A resource, and it's HSLDA, Making Homeschool Possible. Use that resource if you'd like to know more information about what you need to do about legally compliance and about how to homeschool your own kids. I'll be getting into it, kind of compressing some issues and making it easy to digest about some things that you need to do to be compliant and to protect yourself, because there might be a time when a superintendent tries to bring you to court because you're not being compliant in his eyes, but you're actually doing the right things. So what types of paper trails do we need? What types of communications do we need? And what types of testing do we need to do for our children to make sure that we're remaining compliant? I'm going to be getting into more of that, but if you want to jump the gun on that, that is HSLDA, like Hotel Sierra Lima Delta Alpha, and .org. So if that's something you'd like to go and check out, make sure you do, and just kind of get familiar with that website. I will be referencing it a lot over the next year or so as we continue to dive down this course of creating a curriculum for your own children. Well, I do want to thank you for just sticking here with us and just listening every single day. These conversations isn't drive-by. They do all tie in together. So if you're new to the show, make sure you go back and listen to the last 10 episodes or so to make sure that you're caught up, because you'll be more and better educated about how things are tied in together with one of the biggest leviathans that our state has, and that is controlling the future generations. And we have to do everything that we can to at the local level to allow our kids the freedom and the responsibility to be able to think for themselves and to be empowered. As always, make sure you go to warpzoneu.com, scroll to the very bottom, donate. We do survive 100% off your donations, new equipment, be able to expand our reach, and we thank you for all of your giving. It does help us out tremendously. Make sure you like the video, make sure you like the podcast, subscribe, share it with a friend, and make sure, if you haven't done so already, to leave a review. I can't emphasize that enough. We'll be getting more and more reach the more you leave a review. And, be gentle and be nice if you can. I know that the first few episodes, I'm really trying to learn how to swim by being thrown into the deep end. And it's a learning curve. I will tell you that. But I'm devoted to bringing you quality. I'm going to continue doing that. So I hope you have yourselves a great weekend. If you guys want to check us out, if you are on my YouTube, you can just search my name, Todd Thielen. You'll find me. And we're going to be streaming live tonight. My children and I are going to be playing some old school video games from the 90s on our show called Retro Go. And it's going to be a fun time. We air that every Monday and Friday night at 7 p.m. So we'll be back 7 p.m. with my kids, and we're going to be playing some old school video games. Till then, have yourself a great weekend, and God bless.